Kurt Fearnley, welcome to Roll with the Punches.
A pleasure to be here.
It's good to see you again. We had you on the U project, and I was just fascinated by you. I was thinking before we started this, how the hell am I going to introduce this guy? Your bio and your Wikipedia page is something else. It is incredible, and I want to read out a few things off of it. I'm not going to read out much, but what I wanted to highlight was that you've got about something like 20 or 22 things under the recognitions panel, which is the starting in 2004, the Medal of Order for Australia. You've got the New South Wales Institute of Sport Athlete of the Year. You're the Western Region Academy Hall of Fame inductee, Confederation of the Australian Sports Athlete of the Year with a disability. I'm not even going to go on and on because there's 22 of them, along with 13 medals at the Paralympics, 2 at the Commonwealth Games. Bloody hell, are you 100 years old yet?
Well, the last 2 years has felt like a couple of decades, so at least 100 years old. It's funny. The recognition part of it is the. I don't think I've spent 1 minute of my life thinking about any of them.
Do you know how many recognitions are on my Wikipedia page?
Yeah.
I don't have a Wikipedia page. That's how widely recognised I am.
You tell me a person that truly cares about the recognition page of their non-existent the recognition list on their non-existent Wikipedia page, and I will show you the most boring person in the world. Because it's like you get if somebody is looking at the recognition and thinking about the recognition, they're not thinking about the thing they're creating and the really interesting stuff in the mud and the fun stuff. Like that's the stuff that matters, and that's the stuff that you remember, and that's the stuff that you care about. The hard races, the fun races, the grubby adventures. The recognition page, I think, is that's the most insignificant part of the lot.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I remember there was a few things you said in our last conversation I want to touch on because your mindset and your idea around things is fascinating. There's one more thing on that page I do want to bring up though, because it left me scratching my head, and I was like, "What?" The first medal that you got at school was in high jump. Now, please explain.
Look, I was terrible at it, but I was terrible at all sports. When you grow up crawling around the countryside while all your peers walk, winning wasn't really part of the picture, but being a part of everything was. So long jump, high jump,
Triple jump.
100 meters sprint, yeah, and then even the cross country. I'd crawl up the hill. My mate would push my chair up the hill next to me, and we would jump on it and we would go down together. But I did get a third place. There were 5 people in this event. The first one chucked a tantrum and took off, and I'm like, yeah, here we go. Lucky number 4. the fourth person, or the person who was the other one, just kept running through and didn't lodge a jump. So I had my technique down pat. It was crawl, 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 throw yourself. And I made it just above the bat. In my brain, I can't even remember whether it was the long jump or the high jump, but it was a third place in one of them, a little green ribbon that I got to take home, and it was important at the time. Third place, lucky last because of 2 DNFs, but
You
to
pulled a
me in that
Bradbury.
day,
Isn't
I
that pulling a
pulled
Bradbury?
before it was cool. Before a Bradbury was a
Hey,
Bradbury.
Bradbury pulled a Fearnley. That's what happened.
It was
Oh,
yeah, there we go. That's my sporting peak happened when I was about 6.
oh, I love that. Well, we have something in common then because I was quite the triple jump, high jump, and long jumper. And I remember almost breaking the high jump record at my school. Wasn't into, like, by that time, I was already tinkering around, pinching mum's cigarettes and hiding behind. So I wasn't really training for any of that, but I had a bit of an athletic ability jumping around. So High five to us.
Go us.
Like you put more effort into it though.
It's been a hell of a journey since then. It's just been wild. Like it really, really has. It's been wild and continues to be wild. You kind of have this idea of what life will be, and then life's got a way of surprising you.
Yeah. I'd love to hear about how you've kind of evolved your mindset through experience and times and when it changes and shifts. Because I feel like I do this heaps. I go through life, like I went through a lot of my life having one perception of me and believing it. And then at 29, stepping in the boxing ring, and I've talked about this a lot, I step into the boxing ring and that little mask that I'd built fell off, and I went, oh, underneath that layer of bullshit that I have worn for so long, I thought it was me. I thought that was my skin. That's not me. And sometimes, or I guess looking back and realising what things might have driven behaviour, positive or negative. So I'm interested in that. Just, I guess, what has driven you and how have you perceived life for you from when you were young to now, and how people treat you, and has that changed, and has that changed the way? And I guess I'm thinking about it because I remember you speaking about that, people, like we did before, about recognition and praise, and I remember you saying that praise just meant nothing to you.
Well, it depends on who the praise comes from, but like praise from my coach, one word of praise meant the world to me. Praise from my family, praise from, what did I get? I got a message. I got a message the other day, and I host a TV show on ABC, and it was a message from somebody who's in that business who I've seen do work in there and it was just this tiny amount of praise. and it meant the freaking world to me. But I'm very kind of segmented in because I've received praise since I was 5 years old, like praise from the outside world, also like really weird things from the outside world, critiques, being told that you're weird, being told what's wrong, and like I had so much feedback that it's like I had to turn everything off unless it was the person who meant something in that space, because you can't handle somebody coming up every day saying you're inspirational, or it's no good for you.
Yes.
If it's not real, it doesn't feel real, because around the corner you'll get the pity, or you'll get, and I don't know how to switch part on and part off. So if it is praise externally that isn't in that little vacuum that I've created, then no, it doesn't stay at all. It doesn't sit in me or with me. I don't feel it. I don't think about it. I just let it go.
When you're building relationships with people, or getting to know people, or meeting new people, is that something that can dictate kind of how you hit it off? Like, can that get in the way?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. It's funny because I was sitting down talking to Riley Batt the other day, and we were talking about Riley Batt's a Paralympian. He's captain of the Paralympic team at the moment, also captain of the wheelchair rugby team. Great bloody fella. We were talking about how we met our wives, and he met his wife in the gym. She walked into the gym and kicked the ball out from underneath him that he was doing the med ball, that he was doing the balancing act on. And then I spoke about
her already.
I fell off my wheelchair with my wife, and she laughed at me. And I was just like, wait, that's different, It just was a show that there was going to be no bullshit. I didn't have to wade through any of the other stuff. It was just real and fun, and you kind of got rid of all of the other side that you had to deal with previously. So maybe it did get in the road before that. Like if I would have met a friend or if I meet somebody in the street and there was praise that I didn't feel comfortable with, then I probably don't hang out with them next week. You know, and like if I met a girl when I was O'Reilly, and it turned out to be this, you know, you never calling and going, hey, and like it just it probably does, but that's okay, right? Like you know, like we choose to live in quite a robust space, and I've never thought about it getting in the road. Like I've never ever thought about it as a negative thing, potentially negative thing, but I don't think so, because I think the people that have got through are pretty fucking wonderful. And the people within my family, my friends, again, we are very robust, and there's not a lot of you know, yeah. But I don't think I could deal with somebody who is in my life consistently who is very heavy on the praise.
Yeah.
I just don't think I could do it.
Yeah. I remember when I spoke to a former guest, and he has a condition called, way too big for me to remember or pronounce, so I'm not going to try. I'm going to give you the abbreviation. It's FOPS.
All the good ones are, yeah.
FOPS, and it's basically, he's one of 800 people in the world with this condition, and his body is, when it has like a trauma response, and it can either be for physical trauma or just spontaneously, his body lays down bone instead of muscle, ligaments, and tissue. So he has fused. He's becoming a skeleton. So from memory, he's in his 20s. I think maybe late 20s, but his arms are fused across his body, can't move them. He hasn't been able to swallow for 5 years. There's just so much he can't do. He feeds through a tube. But what captured me about that conversation is we just start chatting straight away. And we talked a little bit about that, but the stuff we talked about and the stuff that I could feel were his pain points in life was, and not even due to his condition, but was just the trying to maintain friendships. You know, he was just talking about how it was hard, how, you know, he was feeling like it was hard to build friendships and hard to maintain friendships. And it just highlighted that so often people stumble across podcasts like this and like, oh, wow, what's it like for, you know, a Paralympian, and let me get an insight to that life. The hard stuff. But the hard stuff's the stuff that we're all dealing with so often, and that, you know, I just thought that was really valuable.
Well, I think that the worst thing that we can do, and the worst one I know from my instance, I find any sort of pity is cancerous. You know, if I receive pity, it is like someone slapped me in the freaking face. And I have met people who have been in the most challenging situations. You know, like I've crawled into a refugee camp to find a kid whose life exists in a corner. They won't get pity off me. You know, they will get my support, my care. I do leave that room thinking, that is fucking hard, you know, like just really tough. But tell me one constructive thing that pity has ever given to a human's life. I can only tell you times where it's got in the road and it's crushed people. The continual treatment of a human that just receives your pity never allows them to the same space that you exist happily. It never allows them. It always puts you above them. It always puts them below you.
Yes.
And we see somebody and we put ourselves in their life and think, how would we deal with that? We would deal with it terribly. Oh, a guy who's broken his back. Oh, gee, how would I go if I broke my back? I couldn't do it. You know what? You'd do it if you had to do it. Like once it's there and there's no choice but to go in that direction, you go in that direction. And you know what catches you up every time when you're trying to head down that path is when somebody gets in the road and pours a heap of pity on you. Because then you stop and you go, shit, I am having to do with this shit. They do see me as lower, you know, I'm not their mate. I can't have an equal friendship with this person because all I'm receiving is pity. So I find that is a cancerous thing. And again, although you will get my empathy, love, support, that I don't have the ability to give somebody pity because I don't want to ever get in their road.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It's toxic too, just for I think the mindset that it embeds into the person. Like, I always look at how we speak to ourselves, and we don't normally recognize that, but we just, we take on this, like that persona I had before I ripped the old mask off and went, oh, righto, righto, tough girl. Let's see what's really under there. But, you believe it, you build something, people respond to it, and how people respond to you becomes what you believe about yourself. And that is the dangerous part.
And that doesn't mean that you don't have to be vulnerable, I mean, you can completely be vulnerable, but and like you can be vulnerable and strong, or you can be vulnerable and receiving support, but still believe that pity is useless, and I feel like I sit in this really strange place because people see me sometimes and see, oh, gee, the fella did marathons or crawled Kokoda, but all of it happened because I had open support around me. All of it happened because I knew my strength, but I also knew my vulnerability. It also always happened because I was able to be open with that vulnerability, which meant I was able to put things around me to kind of keep me upright through it. So although we talk about how much I detest pity, that does not mean that I don't embrace and understand and own vulnerability. Like, you don't get more vulnerable than sitting in the mud, You are vulnerable, but you are also strong. And the only thing that will get in the road of you crawling through that mud is somebody going by and pouring you with this freaking pity thing, because then you got to get through that as well.
Oh, that you just made me even. I was just thinking what I'm going to get you to talk about it. Obviously, the Kokoda Track, because what a ridiculously insane thing to raise your hand for. But I was thinking about that as you were talking, and I was thinking about that whole support. And we look at that and go, "Oh, gee, that must be hard. How unlucky." And it's like, hang on, would I be like? I just thought to myself, I wonder if I'd be lucky enough to have that much support to do. Like, I've got my legs work, but I don't know if I've got the shit that matters.
Yeah, and it's weird growing up in the community around disability, is that you do see so many variations of experience with it. Like, you will see two people with the exact same level of disability have completely different outcomes because community decided their place, community decided what their experience would be. And community decided that I will have a very robust, engaged, valued life within community. They decided that, demanded that, actually. But there are so many people that were never given that option. And there are so many people without disability who were never given that option. There were so many people from all these different marginal kind of life experience that I feel this, and I do describe it as this like mixture of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude because I know and I am grateful for each and every time somebody knocked down this door in front of me, but guilt because I know that I'm one of the few, in many cases, one of the few who get given that.
I love that. At what point did the Kokoda idea pop into your crazy little mind? 96 Ks, is that right? 96 kilometres?
96 Ks, yeah.
Couldn't have gone the extra 4 for me?
No,
Round
I couldn't. It was 11 days, 96 kilometres. It couldn't have been a day less or a day more, because if it was a day longer, I was just done being in the mud, right? Like, I was just done. There were days, and I think it was the second last day, we had to cross maybe the third last day, we had to cross like 22 river crossings. Leeches, like, of course, leeches just where leeches shouldn't be,
no.
and the constant feeling of being sore, and the only relief was just to lie down. So you lie down in the dirt, in the mud, on the grass, and I just couldn't have done that for another day. But I couldn't have done it a day shorter either, because I couldn't have went a meter further, a minute further every day in the lead up to it. It came into my world with that, at the loss of a family member. We're a big family. We're pretty close family, tight knit family. The loss of a family member. We were speaking about come together as a family again, reminding ourselves that we're there for each other, and all blokes between my age and about a dozen years older. We all committed to doing the track, and took 18 months to get ready. I did it with all my family. We did it and raised awareness and raised some cash for Movember at the time. And it's the most valuable memory I think I've ever created. Not just because
Goosebumps.
of the hardship and the amazing experience, the PNG people, but sometimes you've got to go out of your road to bring the people that you care about more than anything in the world together to create this adventure that you all get to draw upon for the rest of your life. And that on its own is just so bloody valuable.
How did you... I imagine there were times throughout that where you were just like, can I finish this? Like, what kept you going? What keeps you going?
Yeah, every night was pretty shit. From night 2, and
that's gotta not feel good. 2 nights in.
Night 2, the day was a long one. I think it was a 9-hour day, and it was uphill.
Wow.
And we made it into the village, and it was it was like we had finished crawling around 3 o'clock every day. And at that point in time, you had to kind of deal with every doubt until you went to sleep. So you're tired, you're sore. Immediately when I would stop is I'd strip off. Or a couple of days I was busted, and Mac, my porter, would strip me off, and you'd either get carried down and wash in a creek if you were fortunate enough to be staying near a creek, only a couple of times, or Mac had come over, and there were a couple of days where he would just wash me, and you'd pull all your gear off. If there were any leeches, they'd pull the leeches off. They'd get any sort of cut and bruise and the cut, and they would put like a Dettol on. It was very like basic bush nurse kind of treatment.
Yeah.
But you would Dettol every single cut. They would cover that and then recover it. Anything that was from the day before, they would uncover, Dettol, recover. And then you would lie in your tent and just like wait to sleep, like beg to sleep. And that's when you would feel sore and scared. And that's when they were the hardest. They were definitely the hardest hours of every day throughout the trip, because it was just you couldn't do anything, like you couldn't practically grab hold of a tool. You couldn't put one foot in front of the other or hand in front of the other. You couldn't do a thing to make your reality better except for labor.
Oh, isn't that a testament to life though?
Yeah. Every
Shit
now
in
and
our
then
head is the hardest part.
every now and then you're gonna be punished, and you got to limit the punishment from yourself as much as you can, because there's enough punishment. You jumping on board is probably not great.
Yeah. What was the prep for that like? Do you have any clue exactly what you were crawling into?
Yeah, a little bit.
I was pretty quick with that, wasn't I, by the way? I nearly...
You knew a little bit. Like I met with the tour guide that I went on. I went with Kokoda Spirit and the Wayne Wetherall's he flew down and met me when I first called him and spoke to him about it. And everyone else that I called pretty much hung up on me. And he flew down and we went for a crawl, and I kind of showed him what I can do. And he was just like, we can do this. You know, I'm like, wow, this is real. Yeah. We crawled for about 4 hours and I probably only did about 3K. But he's like, well, if you can do that, we can do it. And I said, give me 18 months. I went to my bootmaker and we slowly built the equipment to crawl the track. His name's Pete at the Village Cobbler in the Junction in Newcastle. And over 18 months, we refined both like neoprene and rubber on my knees, but also that kept the moisture out of your lower legs and groin and as much as you could, but also then put rubber over the wetsuit material to dull the impact. But then also braced my wrist so that all the force would be going to stronger joints as well, yeah, and protected hands and wrist and forearms and stuff. But it was 18 months of just slowly kind of piecing together this bits and pieces of armor and practical stuff to get there, and then also kind of building the physicality to handle it as well.
Yeah, what were some of your training methods?
Well, I was still training for racing, so I was training for the marathon. The days that I was only doing one session, I would crawl in the evening, or the day that I had off, and those crawls would usually be in the stairwell of the apartment that I was living in. So I would just crawl up and down and up and down, up and down, usually in a rain jacket to simulate a bit of humidity, like a bit of heat.
Yeah. How long would you do that for?
About an hour a day. And I started and I did 20 flights of stairs. I did 126 flights of stairs in a little under an hour before I left. So wow. And it wasn't, so it was up, down, counted as one, and you just did it for an hour. So I was doing 126 flights of stairs. So that was 2 flights a minute, bit over 2 flights a minute for an hour straight.
Still doesn't feel like, so you're going into that experience for the very first time. It's not, like.
Yeah, when I flew over.
It's no inside stairwell.
Yeah, but on an afternoon, on a Sunday or so, I would crawl 2 hours in one direction in a national park, right, or along the sand of a beach, and then crawl back. And on top of that, I was also training, probably 10 sessions a week, fairly heavy. But yeah, it was still, I probably could have trained for another 2 years to get the physicality better. But at some point you just got to accept that this is the best I got and let's just start. But it was bloody terrifying flying over the Owen Stanley Ranges from Moresby, landing in Kokoda, and just seeing all of these mountains and going, that's the only way out. Like,
wow. How many of you were doing the trek together?
I think there was 11, the majority of which were my brother's cousins, but I did have a couple of mates as well who joined with us.
You weren't keen to lure them into making them crawl with you?
Well, a few of them had trouble walking it, so
yeah, it's incredible to even think about that. But also, what did it like? Were there moments? Was it also hard to be the one that was gonna, like, obviously it's gonna be easy to walk for the most part for a lot of them?
Well, going down the hills, I actually went quicker than what they would. So going down the hill, it's all about just pivoting off things that you can grab hold of and bracing your arm and literally just going from one rock to a thing. And it's like controlled falling rather than crawling. So
that's what my chiropractor says running is. It's controlled falling.
Well, going down some of those hills was exactly that. It was controlled falling. So I would go down pretty quick. Like there were a couple of hills where I got down the bottom of the hill and I jumped in the water and had a swim, and then the group had like a 20 minutes or so would pass, and then they would catch up. But going up the hill, I was probably multiple times slower than them.
Yeah.
But going slow can be bloody hard on your mentality as well.
Oh,
so standing around with a backpack on in a jungle, taking half a step where you probably it wasn't like, it had its own level of hardship to my non-disabled family as well.
Yeah.
And also this knowledge that they could probably jump through the trek in 6 days, but we were out there for 11.
Yeah.
So that also was a degree of challenge for them.
But I guess it's kind of testament for exactly what you were there to do as a family.
For sure.
Sticking together and being, and I just got goosebumps thinking of it. Like the idea, like that's a blessing for the other guys. It's a blessing to feel challenged, to support someone when you might be getting frustrated, at your own situation.
Yeah, well, there were some nights where they would come down and they'd fallen going down the hills, and they're running into camp, and I've just got out of the river and I'm kind of feeling somewhat fresh before I've crashed, and they're walking into camp with these big, blood kind of coming out of a wound that they had slid down a rock or fell off a tree, whatever it is. So yeah, everyone kind of dealt with their own stuff, and then we as a group also kind of worked through our own stuff together.
We're not painting a good picture, are we? I feel like none of my listeners are going to go signing up for the Kokoda.
You know what? It is the most achievable adventure that we can get. Most achievable, remarkable, meaningful adventure. And it really is choose your own level as well. Like you can walk it at 12, 11, or you can jog it at 5. And you can read books about the meaning to the country of Australia for 2 years in the lead up to it, or you can rock up and have a crack at a walk. It really is like a choose your own level of engagement on there. Make it as meaningful or as superficial as you would like, but it's doable and it can leave a really good impact on you. I hope that my kids do it. I would make it essential to do it if you were 14, 15 and physically and mentally able to undertake it. I would recommend it to anyone.
Oh, I love that. After I did my first fight, someone that come and watched me had bid on one of the auction items, thinking it was a holiday for 2 people. Because they were drunk. They rang me the next day and said, I bought one of this auction item, and it's not a holiday for 2 people. It's a trek through Kokoda for one person with Save the Children, and that one person that goes on it has to fundraise 10 grand. It's paid like $2,500 for this trip. And he goes, do you want it? Because I'll give it away. I was like, oh, absolutely. And and every time I'd speak to someone about that for years, they would always ask me about the Kokoda because they would get confused, Kokoda and Kokoda. But I tell you what, you're so right. Like going there and experiencing a little part of the world and culture and, and the places that we got to. I remember there was an elderly couple with us. They probably weren't that old. They probably don't deserve me calling them elderly. I think they were in their 60s. They weren't old at all, but there were people up into their 60s, and there was a young boy. I feel like he was around 12, and I remember walking across this part of the mountain, and this kid's like running across, and I'm just thinking like we're right on a cliff edge, and I just couldn't believe that we were allowed to be. There were no signs. We were taken by these tour guides that you just wouldn't have got to the places we got to. And I was like, why are we allowed to stand this close to the edge? This kid's like, we could all just fall off, and we're just allowed to do this. We got into places where the photographer couldn't bring his gear, and he had to wedge himself between 2 big boulders to help us cross over to get into this water hole. And it was miraculous, but it was also like, we could just slip and die here. Why
You
are we
know,
allowed to do this?
your guide's probably sitting there going, look, you could crash on the way to your work every day, like, and how good those adventures where there's no
Oh,
guardrails is some great bloody adventures.
yeah.
I remember there was a moment in the middle of the track where I looked to the cross and across into the scrub, into the bush. And it was like the bush telegraph would work, because I would crawl, say I crawled 8K. In between two villages, there was a line, felt like there was a line where one village would stop and you would go about 400 meters further and another village would meet you, and they would walk not next to you, but 5 meters on either side. And I remember looking across one day and there's a girl, a little baby. She's probably 2 or 3, well, maybe 3 or 4, definitely not beyond that. And she's dragging a machete behind her, like a proper machete, dragging it through the jungle on her own. And I'm like, I'm sure mum and dad were either just behind or just in front, but all I could see was this tiny little baby with this bloody machete as big as her. And I'm like, now I've got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. I barely give them freaking butter knives. But there, it was just perfectly normal and probably really practical for this little 3 or 4-year-old kid to have a foot-long machete with her. And we see this as this danger where they probably see that as a guardrail.
Yeah.
That's the thing that will keep her to be able to do this. So, yeah, I do find it really, really interesting that you do sometimes need to go through a bit of danger to see the really remarkable shit. And the remarkable stuff is just, tough to get your head around, but in someone's reality, it's just their norm.
Yeah. It kind of highlights how, well, we're also just so bloody distracted these days. Like, we need handrails on anything, so we're not paying any bloody attention. I remember going to Sydney for the first time, and I went to the Sydney Opera House, and I got there, and there were just busloads of humans, and everyone was standing there either looking down at their phone or taking a photo with their phone. And so I got my phone out, Kurt, and I took a photo of everyone taking a photo of their phone, and then I went, shit, now I'm one of them.
Yeah, that's a big thing, right? Like, your ability to be in a moment. Are you going to have that moment, be in that moment, and have that just for you? But you might forget. It could be incredible, amazing, but one day it's gone. So, which is better? The one where the phone might get in the road for a bit, but you can actually tap into that moment for the rest of your life every time you want to flick through your Instagram stories. Yeah, I'm
Oh, it's
definitely.
interesting, right? Because I'm thinking right now of that waterhole I was just telling you about that we had to jump over the rocks to get to. And I know I've got a folder on my computer with a bunch of photos of it, and sometimes I'll see a couple, but none of them evoke the emotions that when I just pop into my mind and picture it, because there's a feeling and an energy, and you just go, I was there. And the guy couldn't bring his equipment in, and we were like, oh bugger, you can't bring your camera in here, we can't capture this. This is a part of the world that, unless you got a drone, and pretty sure there weren't drones back then, you don't get to see. And that, it was just etched into my mind.
Yeah, I think about, because I'm definitely in the not taking a photo camp. Every now and then I do pull it out, but I'm terrible for taking photos. But I think of two memories that I am just so grateful that phones and Facebook and Twitter wasn't around for. One of them is when I won my first marathon in the Paralympics, and I climbed over the fence. It was a gold medal in Athens. I gave all of my family a hug. We had a couple of beers, with the Chinese guards trying to pull me out of the stands. Then I got up on the podium, and again, this is probably, I think I would have had 3 beers. because it's the marathon, no food.
Oh.
But I'm sitting on the podium and I'm feeling pretty good. And it was one of the most emotional connections that I've had with any podium, any medal. The family are in front of me, and I just, no photo would capture that feeling. And I can feel that whenever I want. I can. And then I've got another memory, because later on that afternoon, I had committed to a song that I was going to attach to that moment, and I did do it. And then I went up to the Acropolis with my mum, and I sat down with her and listened to that song again. And both of those moments are extraordinary with my ability to tap into the emotion for it, because I went out of my way to make it something, and a photo would have killed it. I reckon, sitting there with mum and having my phone out instead of just sitting with her, listening to a song. I think she had an earbud in, I had an earbud in, and we were looking out over Greece, sitting at the Acropolis. How good.
Yeah.
And not a photo in the world to look at, but by far the most, one of the most valuable memories that I've had.
Oh, yeah.
I can't play the song anymore, though. It's an R. Kelly song. And I'm like, how do you do it? Oh, my God. Of all the fucking people to get cancelled and be a horrible prick,
oh, no.
it's the guy that I attached this beautiful, beautiful memory to his song. So now when I turn the song on, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's so mother. And I've never told that story. That is very funny.
You'll have to reprogram the song, perhaps.
I don't know how to do it. Hopefully somebody will remake it one day, and I'll be like, all right, that's acceptable, because, I don't know why, but my brain is like, look, that guy is a horrible prick, and I can't disassociate that from it.
Yeah.
There's my gripe. All right, people can pity me about that. How about that?
The pity hall pass. I love it. When you give talks, what is if you get to choose what you talk about, what is the one thing that you absolutely love talking about the most, or the one message you love to share the most?
Message would definitely be that we all have the ability to either be the builder or the destruction of the people in our lives. So we can make people's lives easier, better, happier, more productive. We can give young kids, pathways and shortcuts, or we can be the miserable bastard. And we're not given alarms or sirens or gold medals when the moment that's in front of us could be the moment that changes our next door neighbor's life, or a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid who's, wanting to get into a pathway of sport. We're not given, sirens to say, this is the moment, do it. Tell him he's great. Tell him, tell her that she's got a huge potential. Invite her into, a pathway with sports. Or the kid's sitting on the ground thinking he's hopeless at soccer. Grab him, put him in the team, make him and allow the pathway that he can experience life there. Mine, if I was to say, it's about everybody recognizing their part to play into changing somebody's life. And you have to go out of your way to do it. You don't do it by being passive. You do it by looking and understanding, that you have the ability to make someone's life better, but you got to do it, So
I love that. I think a lot of people can listen to things like this and be going, what can I take out of this to make my life better, to make me happier, to make me.
But you know what? That is a me, but that's a me as well. Like, that's, you do that, you make that person's life with more option, you feel bloody good.
Yes.
Like, that is, if you want to, I don't begrudge someone being the me, I kind of say there's a shitload more me if you look at everyone else for a bit, you know.
Yeah. What are the kids like? 7 and 3.
My
Yep.
good. They are good.
Whoa, Kurt, there was a little bit of
One
hesitation.
of them is wild as buggery. But they are good kids. They are very free range. They are very again, they're pretty robust. But they are good kids.
Yeah. And what's
they're gonna have really weird stories to tell about disability. I will say that. So I actually say the word cripple quite a lot, not often on podcasts, but it was a part of me understanding who I was feeling the first time you get called a cripple in the playground, you never forget it. So you when I took that away and I was hanging around a heap of kids with disabilities, it was just called Cripple Camp, and we owned that space. It's mine. It's used pretty constantly with my own kind of community. Some of people with disabilities hate it. They've fought against it, never want to own it, but some find community within it. But my kid the other day goes, "Hey, Dad, I don't think you've got the cripple sticker in the car." And I went, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa." So he's been around a really robust conversation around disability since he was born, and he's like had people come into the house and, you know, leg amputees, arm amputees, spinal injury, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, autism, Asperger, you know, like he's had all of this variation of life through the house, that and Amelia as well. More Harry because he was around when I was more active in all different types of sport. But their story that they tell is going to be really interesting as well.
Wow, isn't it interesting the power that one word can have?
Oh, for sure.
And the meaning that it can have across other people.
And how I don't think you really understand the power of the word until it's said to you in the negative light, you know, in the dismissive, degrading light that it can be used. Then you go, I get it.
Yeah. Bit like old Joe Rogan getting in a bit of trouble lately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's tricky. I think it's tricky though, right? Because terms have been used for so long, and especially that one in music, in songs, by the people who can own the term. But, you know, that doesn't apply to everyone, and that's tricky.
It is tricky. And
it's tricky for your children because they're allowed to use these terms at home, then they go out into the world.
But we did speak about that, and we did speak about how that's a term that I'll use with other people with disabilities, and we got to talk about disability and how sometimes it's okay that if there are words for groups of people that are not for other people. They're not for other groups. And we did have that yarn, and he's never said it since, but it was like but the hard thing about language is the change over time as well. Like in the US, as a kid, I remember hearing the R word, you know, consistently on telly when it wasn't referring to people with disabilities, but they would use it constantly, and more so in the US than Australia. But now it's recognised that you don't use the R word, right?
That is a word that as growing up I used all the time, and not as a derogatory term, just in general language, and it had become a hard one to let go, and I just didn't get it because the intention behind it wasn't what the word meant to me. So it's tricky.
But if I walk by a group that's calling each other cripples, like it has no other context can exist for it in my world than the context that it is. They may be using it in a way that isn't where nobody in that group has a true relationship with what that word means. So it's superficial. It means nothing. It means, you know, the breath of air. But that person that hears it thinks is that about me? Were they
Mm.
talking about me? Do they think I'm that person, that word?
Yeah.
And that's where it really kind of hits the road, but we would have had to, like, I had to walk by the first time I was called a cripple. You don't, you walk by it and you move on and you're like, shit. But now nobody walks by that word.
Yeah.
And that reduces the amount of times that's all the R word, all the N word,
Yeah.
that reduces
All of the
impact.
words.
There's a few, I actually think that's about it, but there are other, but it is complicated, but I think it's just, we as humans, we kind of evolve and we understand our impact further, our impact on each other more as we go along. And then hopefully we adjust and move on. So, and I don't know. Yeah. I think that, the tough thing is the changing meaning over time.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm gonna have to let you go because I've got another potty soon. I'd love to keep I'd love to keep bantering, but thank you so much. Hey, where can my listeners? You've got a podcast. Plug whatever you've got going on.
Yeah, you know what? The Paralympics. When is this going to air?
It'll be in a couple of weeks.
Okay, well, if it goes to air before, you can delete this if it's already after. But from the 4th to the 14th of March, the Paralympics are on, the Winter Paralympics. So they're in Beijing in China. And every day I'll be doing a podcast called You Little Ripper. And it's just a 15-minute blast of what our Aussies are doing over there. What's the Paralympic movement? What's the Winter Games like? And yeah, we'll be doing it every single day, called You Little Ripper. And I've got my own podcast that I'm going to start shooting back out again. That's called Tiny Island. And it's just a heap of yarns with Australians about what it is to be an Australian.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I might even chop that clip out and put it up so people know about the Paralympics, just in case I don't get this episode up in time.
Perfect. You can use that incriminating. What did I say? You can use my R. Kelly yarn to then also go, hey, and remember, Paralympics are on the 4th of March, the 14th of March in Beijing. You Little Ripper.
Boom. Thank you so much, Kurt. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No problems. Good luck with the next yarn.
Thank you.